Welcome to the Homegrown podcast, a place where we share the truth about food and farming from our kitchen to yours. I'm your host, Liz Hazelmeyer, along with my husband, Joey.
Good afternoon.
And together we hope to educate, inspire, and equip you in your pursuit of true nourishment. Today's guest is Jordan Dooley. Jordan is a 2-times national best-selling author, host of the She podcast, and a mother of 2, sharing her faith and wellness journey online. Jordan, welcome to the show.
Hello. What an intro. Thank you for having me. It's so fun to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited because I've been following your story online for several years now, and it's just such a beautiful weaving of kind of something we talk about often is like our real food journey, like the progression of realizing like, oh, maybe our food's not that healthy and we should look into it.
Yeah.
And you've done that in your whole life with this low-tox journey and fertility, and now with your 2 beautiful sons. So I'd love to start at the beginning and hear how the last several years have gone.
Yeah. Well, it's a long story, but the nutshell version is I thought I was really healthy because I had abs and I went for runs and ate salads. And I think that's kind of what society says is the picture of health. If you're lean, if you're ripped, if you eat greens, like you're healthy. And I was really confused when I was young and all of a sudden having issues like chronic cystic acne coming up out of nowhere, signs of inflammation, suddenly having recurrent miscarriages. And, at first, my very first miscarriage, I remember many providers said, oh, you're young and healthy. It was probably just a chromosomal fluke, like try again. Tried again, another miscarriage, then just stopped getting pregnant for a while. And I was like, something's wrong. Like there's clearly something off. And so that really prompted me to just go on a huge investigative journey. And I really just started researching and learning a lot about food and food quality and sourcing and the products we put on our body and in our bodies and all the things. And so I really just started overhauling some things. And I kind of got pretty intense with it there for a second, kind of had to find a more sustainable approach. But I was just so determined and on a mission to figure out what was going on and support my body because it was clearly sending me smoke signals that something was not right and that it couldn't heal and that there was imbalance and there was, I think when you start to have issues with things that make you feel really insecure, like your skin as a woman, or your fertility, which just feels like a really sacred place to suddenly feel like it's just something's being robbed from you. It can really create this like fire to make shifts in your personal life. I don't know that I would have if it was just the acne, although that was kind of what started it too. But those two things combined, I was like, something's off, something's not right. And so that kind of kicked off my wellness journey 4 or 5 years ago to where I really just started shifting from, okay, wellness is fitness to wellness is a holistic whole body approach. And that begins with nutrition, that begins with understanding my body's needs, that begins with reducing toxin load. I didn't even realize so many of our products were loaded with things that were disrupting hormones and carcinogens and all the things. And so it was a journey. There was definitely a point where I felt like I was trying to control everything, and we can talk about that if you want, but I kind of had to learn, what does it look like to remember like that we can't avoid every possible risk, but we can make wise choices to be better stewards. And so that was kind of where I have landed in the last year or two. But yeah, it was a journey, and it really, my suffering opened a whole new world that I now see as a blessing and a lot of knowledge and information that I probably otherwise wouldn't have looked into. That has actually blessed my family that I now have and given me a really strong foundation to be able to make choices that I feel better about that I otherwise wouldn't have thought about probably at all if I had not dug into it. So
yeah, your struggle turned into a blessing. What a beautiful perspective. I know so many people can relate to that because I think anytime you talk to someone and they have a big change of health perspective, it usually comes after a sickness or watching a loved one go through something or a loss of some kind. Yeah. And I hate that it sometimes takes us to get to that point to wake up, but it's just our society, man. We're entrenched in this, like everything sold at the stores is fine. And big companies are out to look for your health and safety. And of course they would never put anything in there that wouldn't be good for you. And, I think the awakening of folks is happening now, maybe faster than it was before due to some, social events and circumstances. But I hope, by sharing journeys like yours, and we've shared similar journeys with our family, that we can help people skip some of that pain and
that
move
was a big
into
thing. I feel like, wow, it really took a lot of grief and heartbreak and devastating loss for me to be like, wait a sec.
Yeah.
And of course, there's sometimes and this is the other hard part of it, is like, you can do everything right and things can still go wrong. Like, you can eat all the organic and make all the best choices, and sometimes you still get sick or you still face like, we're not immune to death and loss on this side of heaven, right? And hardship and suffering. However, we can minimize our risk with certain things by the choices we make. And I think it really made me realize, like, wow, there's a lot of people, and I mean, myself included, if I wouldn't have experienced something that was such a disruption to my life and like blew up my life, it felt like, I don't know that I would have explored any of this. And like you said, I think that is so often the approach until it becomes I have to address this. A lot of people don't. And we're busy. There's a lot going on. Like, I get why not, but I have such a heart to inform and educate and hopefully help maybe some people avoid certain things. If like, I wish I could have gone back and changed my products when I was 16. Like, what difference could that have made to my health now as a 30-year-old? I don't know. So I don't know. I have that same heart of like, can we help you maybe avoid some of that just by sharing this information?
Yeah. And you do a wonderful job, by the way. I mean, the way you share information is never fear-mongery or intimidating. It's very balanced. And I think I'd love to get into, like, what were some of the first switches that you made in the beginning?
Good question. One of the very first swaps I remember making was deodorant, primarily just because I had learned a lot about the way aluminum can affect things. It's it's really close to your lymphatic system, breast tissue, etc. And it felt like a simple place to start. I didn't get really into a lot of things like makeup and kitchen products and all the other stuff. It felt like that was really overwhelming. So I started with just deodorant. And then I think the second swap I made was feminine care products, just choosing 100% organic, things like that. So some of those things that were kind of in the best way, I don't know what, personal areas, if you will, like absorbent areas of your body, I kind of prioritize that. And then I slowly moved into some other personal care products, some household products, things like that. But I started with those two. And I feel like for women especially, that's a really great place to start, because it can be really overwhelming to think about changing every single makeup product and every single beauty product and every single household product. So it's like, just start with two kind of intimate personal care products, your deodorant and your feminine care. You can grow from there. So
yeah, things that are going in your crevices, right? You're being absorbed. I need to know, do you have like a good deodorant brand? Because I need to know. I'm personally interested in investing.
Yeah, I feel like the best one I found that like lasts pretty well in terms of, and also like the cleanest option I found that lasts pretty well would be Primally Pure. Some people feel like in some ways that leaves like a white residue on some clothes, so they have a charcoal option that works pretty well. Men tend to use that. My husband uses that one. Another brand I recently found was Curie. I wouldn't say they're quite as clean. Like Primally Pure is truly like the purest, but Curie is a little bit more of a budget friendly, and they have fragrance on their labels, so most people kind of freak out about that. But what I love is that they, on their website, for every single deodorant, they disclose what's actually in the fragrance. So they're actually like, the problem with fragrance isn't that there's a smell, it's that fragrance is a blanket term that basically could be a conglomeration of toxins or chemicals that we don't know. So when a company discloses what those are and explains the use and what it is, that's a big green flag, if you will. Is it perfect? Maybe not, but it's a big green flag. So I've kind of explored that one, and I like that one still works pretty well, but doesn't leave any kind of white residue. It's just a little bit more budget friendly. So that's kind of how I compare those two. Those are two I've kind of played around with. And then there's one called Rustic Maca. Have you heard of it? That's a baking soda free option, I believe. At least last I checked it was. I should probably double check. But some people who don't want baking soda in their deodorant, some people have a reaction to it or prefer not to use it. That's another like lower tox option that a lot of people seem to like. So
love that. I have also heard, I haven't tried it yet, but my mother-in-law swears by it. She was just telling me this on vacation. Tubes & Co. has an amazing deodorant that apparently is really effective. So I was like, I need to try that because I have all their other products. Cool. Haven't tried their deodorant yet, so that's really good. And then feminine care. I was just talking about this on social media because I was doing like a teenage daughter post, like things that we do to support our teenager, and like organic cotton pads is one of those things. I grew up in like the world of Tampax, and now that I think about the fragrances and always, why am I putting that there? You know, why?
Yeah.
And everyone was like, what are the brands? And I'm like, I don't know. You just go through the grocery store. Now, some of them have a organic cotton like topper, and the stuff underneath isn't as clean. But to me, I'm like, you do the best you can, right? We can't all spend $12 on pads every single like month. But I think there's enough good options out there that you can find something that's at least topped with an organic cotton padding.
Yep. The biggest thing I say is if you can look for 100%, I think it's called God certified. I want to make sure I'm saying that right because I know what it looks like, but that's helpful too. And there's like Cora is sold in most stores, and they have you just want to look for 100% organic cotton. That's really helpful. Cora is sold in stores. Lola is sold in some stores, but it's more like order on Amazon, order online, and theirs meets that criteria. And NaturCare also does. And some of them don't have plastic applicators too for like the tampons. If people use tampons.
Nice.
Organic cotton period underwear. A lot of people like swear by. I have not crossed over into that yet at this point. 100% organic, or what is it? 100% GOTS certified organic cotton. That's something you can look for if brands have that. I actually made a post not too long ago. I can send you the link to it to pop into the show notes on kind of some of the like criteria if you want to go like a little bit extra steps and want to make it like the best you can find. There's 3 or 4. I mentioned those brands and I put the criteria in that post. But yeah, even if you can just find something that says 100% organic cotton, grab that. That's better than what you're going to buy if you just grabbed the generic Tampax. So
yeah, the Cora brand works really well. I do like theirs a lot.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So you started with the intimate spaces, right? Which makes total sense. Because some of us don't put makeup on every single day, and you don't maybe wash your hair every single day. So those things are a later transformation. How did you approach your kind of realization that like maybe I'm into this a little too deep and I'm obsessing and I have fear? And how did you kind of work to a balanced perspective on your health and wellness?
Yeah. So for about 2 to 3 years there, I went to I was trying to avoid every last toxin I could possibly avoid. And I was kind of not having fun. I was like, I'm kind of not loving my life. Like, I feel like I'm not enjoying, like if I go out to eat, I'm freaking out about every little thing. And, it was nostalgic and kind of like deja vu of when I was in college. And at that time, I was really controlling of my eating and my health more from a calorie restriction, trying to get super fit and lean perspective. I was logging a ton of miles, counting my calories, restricting food, those kind of things. And that was more because I was focused on the form of my body. And I was really kind of obsessive about that. And it started to make me realize as I was kind of going on this journey, and then even as I was on this journey, I thought, oh my gosh, I have healed my acne or improved my acne. My hormones are better. I had a lot of improvements in symptoms. So I thought for sure my next pregnancy will be a success. And then when I still lost that baby, I was like, okay, I don't have control. It was so frustrating for me because I thought this would be the solution. And while I do think it absolutely helped, and I think it did support my successful pregnancy in many ways, it wasn't the magic pill that I think sometimes the holistic world can make it seem like you have this issue, you just change this, this, and this, and it'll all go away. That's not always the case. Things can improve. You can experience healing. Your body is designed to heal. It probably will. But that doesn't mean it's this magic pill. And I think I was really disappointed by that. And I felt like I'd kind of been sold a lie, just like I felt like I had been sold a lie by just normal mainstream everything. I think I thought, oh, if I just make all these changes and I improve the function of my body. So this time around, it was obsession in terms of avoiding seed oils and avoiding toxins and all of the things because I wanted the function of my body to improve. I wasn't so concerned with the form and how skinny or ripped I was. And so, but it just felt really similar to that control, gotta log and track and avoid and check everything. And it was almost wait a second, I'm trying to be the god of my life here. And then it's not really giving me some great results, but it's not the magic pill I thought. So that was where I started to kind of go, okay, what can this look like in a sustainable way? And then the other kicker was in my pregnancy, I still had to be on some actual pharmaceutical medications like blood thinner. I have blood clotting disorder that no amount of toxins is going to stop me from having, right? Or no amount of toxin reduction is going to stop me from having. So I think that was just where I was like, okay, I have to release some of this stuff because I can do the best I can, but there's just certain things I can't control and I might have to compromise on. And there's a time and a place for medicine. There's a time and a place where you might have to eat out of plastic because you got to eat dinner and you have kids running around or whatever it might be. So I had to, really consider what can I sustain through a high risk pregnancy, through now I had a newborn in a pregnancy, which was a unique experience we can talk about. So I just found myself having to go, okay, I have to surrender some of this. And also what can I sustain in the lifestyle and the season of life that I'm in? Where can I prioritize certain things? Where do I maybe make some compromises or be a little bit more flexible? And that really just led to finding a really sweet balance where kind of that 80-20 mindset, if you will, really started to take root. Because I think I was feeling if I don't do 100% perfect, if I eat a donut, I'll never have a baby. My skin will freak out. And that's such a lie. It's who are we to think that we get to control that just because we remove certain things from our lifestyle or add things to our lifestyle. So it was a humbling experience, to say the least. But that was kind of the journey that led me to now. I feel like it's a pretty sweet, like, intentional lifestyle, but we have some balance. We'll eat some French fries, So yeah.
It's the intentionality piece that I think is the part that you never let go of. So you can be in seasons in your life where you're like, hey, right now, my food is not really ideal right now. Maybe I'm going through something, and that's okay. Maybe I'm on vacation and I'm doing the best I can, but I'm going to be intentional, at least hit my protein, or at least try to. And that's the piece where I feel like if we're not focused so in the weeds, and I almost wonder, though, talking to enough people, if everyone kind of has to go through that obsessive phase, and hopefully they quickly break free from that. But it is kind of a part of the journey. But I just wonder if that's maybe part of everyone's journey is they get into this point where they are kind of scrutinizing every little bit, and hopefully they don't stay there for long. I would say hopefully that's just a little blip in their journey, and then they move on from that and they can reach that more balanced approach.
Well, and I think it's like, it's kind of one of those, like, once your eyes are open and it's hard to unknow and unsee, and it's like the more you know, the more you're aware. So it is kind of the catch-22. It's like a blessing to have that knowledge so you can make better choices. But there is kind of a phase where you're like, oh my gosh, there's so much I was just blissfully unaware of. And in some ways that was a blessing, but also this is important to know so I can make better choices. So it's just the catch-22, and it's the nature of it. And usually most people end up kind of finding that place of equilibrium that works for their family, that works for their lifestyle, that works for their budget, while making the best choices they can. But it is kind of a shell shock as your eyes are open to a lot of this stuff, for sure.
And I have so much grace and empathy for people who are there right now. If they're in that obsessive, area.
And
if
you don't usually know you're in the obsessive area until you kind of start to, like, come out of it a little bit.
Yeah,
you think I'm just doing all the right things. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're currently listening to this and you're like, I feel stressed, you might be in the obsessive era, okay? And you might need to take a break, and you might need to, like, reevaluate how you're feeling about your life.
Yeah.
And the reason we would say, at least that I would say that that's important, is because of longevity.
Yeah, you don't want to live there.
Like, right, if you were doing everything right and you're just happy, good.
You're crushing it.
Good.
Go for it.
Right? If you're avoiding everything and, like, as long as you're still eating calories, right? Like, you go out to eat, and you like, as long as you're still eating food and you're joyful and you're enjoying life, great. But I think the purpose for wanting to not be kind of overextending yourself is so that there's longevity. And at the end of the day, this volume game, this long game we're playing here, it's, hey, how can we do something that's sustainable for a long period of time? And maybe you build on that, right? Maybe it builds, maybe it grows.
It ebbs and flows.
Exactly.
Too.
Yeah. Exactly.
I would say,
well, you tend to find that you can actually sustain and do more if you make changes in a I think a lot of people, once they start to realize things, at least for me, and I also felt like I was on, like, a tight timeline because I wanted to get things moving along. It can feel like you have to overhaul everything, like, really quickly. And I think taking kind of a step-by-step approach and integrating small changes, it allows it to become more of just like a lifestyle that becomes normal versus like, oh my gosh, how did I get here? I just landed in this whole new lifestyle that I can't afford or can't keep up with. Whereas if you're just doing one small thing at a time and it builds, it does feel a lot more sustainable.
I use the example that when we have a party or we're hosting some event in our home, right? Elizabeth cleans things that have never been cleaned before, right? And it's like, every nook and cranny, we're like decluttering, pictures that we've been holding on to that our kids colored that are on the fridge, like nothing is safe.
In the trash.
Nothing is safe, right? The house is going to be spotless. But to clean like that every day would be insane. It's just we don't
do anything else.
You can't do anything else. We'd have no time to do anything else in our life. And so there are natural rhythms of keeping a clean home that we do.
That's a good analogy. I've never heard you say that before.
Well, here we are.
Wow, that's helpful.
That's a good analogy.
Helpful for my brain.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you, during your fertility journey, were you ever able to dial in and figure out a root cause? You mentioned blood clotting. Was that ever established that was causing the miscarriages?
Yeah. So I found a couple different things, and it was really fascinating. So in the journey, I found I had some blood clotting issues, risk factors that were probably contributing to miscarriages. I was also diagnosed with endometriosis, very somewhat minimal. Like, I didn't have pain. It wasn't like adhering all my organs together, but I did have at least the start of endometriosis. And from what I gathered, I think a lot of the lifestyle changes I had started to make probably helped kind of like help that from growing, if for lack of a better word. But I had the start of some endometriosis that I decided to just kind of tackle with these lifestyle changes as much as I could. And I was also having a really unique but also common cause of miscarriage. It's an immune response, which sometimes is connected to endo, but they don't have like any way to prove that that's like one is causing the other. So it's kind of hard to know, like if you surgically remove endo, is that going to fix it? It's more clear if you're struggling to get pregnant, that's more of a clear result that tends to happen. Whereas with the miscarriage thing and immune stuff, it's a little unclear. But a big thing we found is my immune system was responding to a pregnancy as if it was an organ transplant, is the best way to say it.
Wow.
So when you think about it, it actually makes sense. The immune system should attack a placenta, which is an organ being formed in your body that's half of someone else's DNA. Like logically, if there were any other situation where that was happening, your immune system would be like, that's foreign, get it out of here. So typically, if your body is functioning from a healthy immune like function in pregnancy, that trigger to attack that placenta shuts off and it says, wait, there's a little immune flare at the beginning of pregnancy. And then your body's like, wait, that's a pregnancy. That's a baby. It's okay. My function wasn't shutting off. So it was like, oh, foreign placenta, like attack. Because one of the things we had found is we had some fetal tissue genetically tested and it was genetically normal, even when I was on the blood thinners. So that was kind of interesting where we were like, we thought that was the only issue. And so when genetically normal baby, while reducing the blood clotting risk, was still being lost, there's something that's not firing from an immune standpoint. So they had to put me on something to basically like reduce my immune response so that it would just stay normal, just so it wouldn't like turn into this crazy response. And it's interesting because the body, as you have more and more pregnancies with the same partner, it can learn faster, like, foreign attack. So that's where this recurrent miscarriage thing can happen. So I worked with a reproductive immunologist and they were able to identify that as a primary issue and kind of support or kind of suppress my immune response so that it wouldn't attack the baby. And then I was able to carry the pregnancy. So I think it was a combination of the immune suppressing medication, the blood thinning medication, and the lifestyle stuff. I think all of that just helped support a healthy pregnancy. But it was really humbling for me, even as a very holistically minded person, to be like, I have to be on medications, which is the last thing I want to do during a pregnancy. But it worked.
So when you were in this sort of investigative period, was it helpful for you to do the tissue test and see that genetically the baby was like, there were no abnormalities? Like, how did you feel through that process? And would you recommend that to other people?
You know, it really depends. The first time around, I didn't, because I just felt like I didn't want to do a science project on my child. It just felt really difficult. The second time around, I was further along, like kind of into the second trimester, which was pretty shocking. I had no signs of anything being wrong. So I was like, okay, I kind of want answers now. And then I was really upset because what no one told me, none of my providers told me that we could send this tissue off for testing and not get answers. They make it sound like if you do this, it'll be a done deal. So I was really looking forward to having some sort of like explanation from that one way or the other to know what to do next. And when they called me a few weeks later to say, actually, there was maternal cell contamination, which means we couldn't differentiate your DNA from the baby's DNA. So we don't know, like I don't even really understand what it means, to be honest. So basically they couldn't get clear enough answers to tell me one way or the other. I was pretty like frustrated by that. And I was disappointed, so it was different each time, to be honest. The third time I was able to get information and it was pretty clear. They were like, but the thing that was, I think, interesting is I thought I wanted to know the gender because I felt like I wanted something I could hold on to, something that like you don't really get much information in that situation. And then when I found that out, I was like, okay, now I don't know how I feel about that. Because now for the rest of my life, I know I had a daughter that I won't meet, whereas before it was like not as clear. But at the same time, I'm thankful for that. So it was like both and, it was like thankful for some clarity because when I knew that it was genetically abnormal or genetically normal, then I was like, okay, then I have to explore this immune route because there's something going on in my body that's rejecting pregnancies. But it brought up a lot of mixed emotion for sure. And each time it was a little bit different. The first time it was really emotional. I wanted to kind of protect that life. The second time I was like, give me answers. The third time I was like, I have to do this again to hopefully get answers this time because now I'm out of like next steps kind of thing. So yeah, it was complicated to say the least.
Yeah. Well, I ask that just because I think for folks going through it, these are the questions they would want to ask, if they were sitting down to coffee. And we have family members who have gone through that too. And the tissue test results are hard when you get them back and everything's like, oh, it's genetically normal. And by the way, we know the gender.
You almost want them to tell you it's abnormal.
Exactly.
And when they tell you it is normal, then you're like, then what's wrong with me? It creates a whole, but in some ways, I think I'm thankful that I got that because otherwise I might have just continued to listen to providers who were like, it was probably just a bad egg. It's like, do I really have that many bad eggs? Like, come on, So yeah, I mean, it's a blessing and really hard at the same time. It's like a blessing and pretty brutal information to have to digest. So
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your vulnerability and sharing that. Because I actually think that that provides a lot of peace for folks, and they kind of know what to expect going in if they're walking through this right now. I would love to get into the beautiful ending of this story and continuation of your life, and talk about your pregnancy and adoption and how that all went down.
Yeah. So the short story is somewhat early, like within a year and a half or so into our journey of trying to grow our family. We had also been volunteering with a program called Safe Families, which is very similar to foster care, but more like respite care. And it's actually designed to help prevent children from going into the foster care system. So instead of the courts coming and removing children from homes and placing them in foster care homes, parents can actually voluntarily raise their hand and reach out to Safe Families as an organization and say, hey, I'm in an unsafe situation, or my water was shut off, or I can't care for my child right now, and I don't have family to call. I don't have a backup babysitter. I don't have anyone to help me. Like, I need help. And so that is basically their opportunity to put their child in a safe situation temporarily so that they can get whatever they need to in order. So we had a couple of different hostings that we did. Some were 2 days, some were 2 weeks, a couple were 2-3 months. And we had a sibling pair in our home, and there was some talk about they might need to be adopted. Mom's considering adoption, kind of back and forth. So we weren't really sure what was going to happen with that. But because it was presented to us of, if this was needed, would you do it? It really forced us to have the conversation of, would we adopt right now with where we're at if it was a need? And we had, when we were engaged and before we were married, we had always said we'd love to adopt. That's part of our family plan. But I think in our mind, we thought we'll have a couple kids, then we'll adopt. Like, that's the order we had. And then through the Safe Families experience, it was like God kind of just like opened our eyes and broke our heart and was like, if I asked you to do this before your timing, would you do it? And so we had this whole conversation, and both of us were just like, yeah, especially when there's like 2 kids in your home that you're like loving, it's like, how could you say no? So that was where we were like, well, let's start the home study process, because whether this ends up being something we need to say yes to, or if God has something else for us, we'll just kind of open. I felt like God was kind of nudging us, and we still weren't really far along in our fertility journey. We had a couple miscarriages, but it wasn't like, I don't know. I felt like God really convicted me, like, don't treat this as a last resort if you feel called to it. If it's a calling, like, what if you just open the doors to both and trust me with the order?
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, I talked to my husband about that. He's like, yeah, I mean, we don't get to say how this goes. So we kind of released that. We started the home study just to be ready and available. And then through that process, it wasn't through Safe Families. We got connected with an adoption agency and basically just opened the door to both. And then we got the call after another miscarriage that we had, where I was like, God, what are you doing? We ended up getting a call that a baby was due the same month I would have been due with the baby we had just lost.
Oh my.
It was like the most,
I just got chills.
Bizarre thing. Yeah. And so we were like, well, yeah, okay, yes. So we said yes to that. And that ended up being our oldest son. And shortly before he was born, we also found out I was expecting again. And I was very much like, well, this isn't going to happen. I was just kind of like, I think I was preparing, just when you have a lot of loss and a lot of disappointment, I was preparing to be double heartbroken. I was like, neither of these are going to happen. I'm just going to I kind of blocked it out, to be honest. It took me a minute to come around, but I just felt really unsure, of how it would go. And I was really doubtful of is this just a tease? Is this just going to break my heart? But then our son was born. We had the most beautiful adoption experience and an incredible relationship with his birth family. Absolutely loved them. Everything was just so peaceful. There was just such a I was the first to hold him. He was born and they put him on my chest. That was what his birth mother wanted. And I just admire her so much. I was so humbled by that. So anyway, yeah. So our sons are less than 6 months apart. And the first 6 months of that were absolute chaos. And I was like, this is the biggest blessing. And also, I don't know what day it is, but it was amazing. And I just never thought that would be my story, and I share that because there were so many times in our journey of waiting and wondering if adoption would happen or if this pregnancy would work out or not work out or whatever, that I think, would hear people's stories of hope. I would hear, well, I had 4 miscarriages and now I have 4 kids, or, I thought I would never get pregnant and then I got pregnant when I was 40, and I heard all these amazing stories and I just thought, that's awesome for you. But I don't know if that's going to be my story. So it's encouraging and it's also not, because the hardest part of it is there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee that if you wait long enough or pray enough or do enough treatments or tests or even sign up for adoption or whatever, there's no guarantee that you'll have a family or the baby that you've been praying for. And I think that's the hardest part of the whole thing, because I think waiting and shots and tests and legal paperwork and all the things you might do on the journey to build a family would feel so much like that's hard on its own, but that would feel so much more doable if you knew this is going to eventually be worth all the time and tears and everything else. And I think that was the part where I always kind of hesitate to share my story, because I'm like, I hope it brings you hope, but I also remember being in that position of like, that's great for you, but like, what if it doesn't work out that way for me? And it's just a complicated place to be in.
Yeah. What's your advice for folks who have close family members or friends or community that are going through this journey? Like, how can we, what actually feels good in a conversation for folks going through that?
I think the biggest thing, you know, there were a lot of people who were really well-meaning in it. And I like, if they shared a pregnancy announcement, it was almost like they tried to downplay it. They were like, but I'm really overwhelmed because it's our 5th kid. And I was like, what? Like, what are you saying? That's like talking to a homeless person saying, we got a new house, but it's a lot to manage. You know, it's like, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't feel good. Right. And so I think just being really, the best thing is, I'm so sorry. Your feelings are valid. I hate this for you. This isn't fair. I wish it was different. Like, just kind of validating the feeling, and, you know, not trying to relate on something you really can't relate on, unless they open up like, hey, you went through something as a child and that was your suffering. Like, sometimes there's those conversations, but I wouldn't open that and say, oh, I get it, because I, you know, took 3 months to get pregnant or whatever. Because I think when you're on the receiving end of that, you're like, but you don't, you know, you just don't. And even now I have to be cautious, because like, yes, I went through it, but I'm also on the other side in some ways. And I remember, as much as it was helpful to talk to people in that place, sometimes you get a little bit disconnected because you're caught up in parenting. And so I just know the most helpful thing for me to hear was like, your feelings are valid in this, or I hate this for you. This sucks. Like, it's okay to be mad. You know, I'm sorry. Like, just, that's the most you can really say. And I think we want to say more. Like, we want to relate. We want to find a connection point. We want to fix it. We want to make them feel better. And the reality is, you just don't make them feel better. But the biggest thing you can do is make them feel supported and seen and held. And I think one thing I like to share the example of is like, even with like pregnancy announcements or baby related things, if there's someone who's really in the thick of it right now in your life. I remember when we had, I don't know, one of our miscarriages, my husband's brother and my sister-in-law, they got pregnant with their first. And, you know, there would be a lot of people who would try to tell me that in a gentle way, but sometimes it just didn't come across well. It just felt kind of like impersonal or cold, or they expected me to react somehow, or they were kind of pitying. I even got announcements that were like, this is the hardest share that I have to make. And I was like, thanks for making me feel like a burden, you know? So there's just like, anyway, but they did it so well. And I love to share this because I wish this was the way it was always done. They wrote us a letter and they sent it in the mail. There was no pressure to respond via text. There was no, you know, telling us in person or over the phone. And it was just very like, we wanted to let you guys know that we recently found out we're expecting, you know, we have no expectation of you to react. We want to be cognizant of your feelings. You tell us what kind of contact you want to have in this season. Like, there was no pressure to like, and that I just think is the best. I even had a friend one time, again, with one of my miscarriages, I was supposed to be hosting her baby shower, and then I lost a baby. And she was like, no offense, but I wouldn't want to be around me if I was you. So I'm going to just let you off the hook. If you don't want to keep hosting the shower, I can like defer that to someone else. She didn't take it from me, but she was like, I wouldn't want to be around me. So just like putting yourself in those shoes and thinking, what's the human response, and not the like, I'm going to pity you, but more like, I wouldn't want to be around me. So if you don't want to, I don't blame you. Like, taking any expectation off of somebody, and any pressure, not treating them weird or different, but just giving them that like permission to be like, it's okay if this is hard for you to be around. Don't feel pressured. And if you want to be around, we want to have you, you know, things like that. I felt like those types of responses were the most helpful, because it didn't make me feel like I had to show up and fake it, or like I was like a burden or something like that. So those are just few examples of people that really responded really well.
Wow. That's really beautiful that they wrote that letter, gave you time, put it in kind of your court, but not in a way of like, hey, we're scared of you, but just like, hey, we're letting you know. And that's so sensitive and so kind, especially with it being their first. And I'm sure lots of.
And then the craziest part of that, like the sweetest part of that, was we ended up adopting Noah, and now those kids are like a month apart, 2 weeks apart. So and we didn't know about Noah at the time. Like, we didn't know how that was all going to go. So it was still a really hard and sensitive time when they found out, but just the way the Lord like weaved it all together, it was so cool. I was like, wow, that was not expected, you know? But they were really thoughtful in the way they did it. So
I have to ask, because you've written 2 incredible books already, and I think you're writing a 3rd right now. Do you ever think you'll write a book on this story?
I don't know. So I wrote some of the story in my second book, Embrace Your Almost, but I wrote that book in 2022 when I was still kind of in the thick of, I don't know how this is going to end. And that was kind of the point. I think that's what makes the book powerful, is it didn't end on this like, and now here's the happily ever after tied up in a pretty little bow. I wrote it from the place of like, I don't know how this is going to go for me. And you're probably in a place like that too, if you're reading this book. And it wasn't a fertility specific book, but it was just for anyone who was in a place of like, I'm not where I thought I would be and things aren't going how I wanted in life. And I'm really confused as to what to do next. And so anyway, this next book is somewhat more on my wellness journey and kind of a grace-based approach to making healthy choices and stewarding our bodies well. So some of the story will be woven into that, but specifically on this story, I don't know. I kind of feel like I don't know. That's a good question. I don't have plans to. I don't have like another book on the docket planned. I think part of me feels like after this book that I feel like I'm really supposed to write, there needs to be a moment, like a break. And then maybe I'll look back and have a lot more to say on it. But I feel like I'm still kind of like, I don't know, recovering from the shock of it. Like sometimes I look in my house, I'm like, we have 2 high chairs. We have 2 high chairs and it's a year in. I mean, my oldest is 15 months. So it's like, it's still kind of like surreal to us. We have still a lot of pinch me moments. So I think I'm just kind of letting that be before I try to like explain the whole thing in a book. But at some point I could definitely see it. It might be a while though.
Yeah. And there could be things unfolding still that, like you'll want to share parts of their stories too, that might not have even happened yet, So God's timing is always perfect. So I think that's really cool. I'm curious if in your sort of wellness journey, there was ever things that you adopted and then you were like, this isn't serving me right now. We've asked this question many times because we have walked through that. So I'd love to hear what you kind of ditched.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I even think of like, there was a point where I was like, I can't ever have any dairy because dairy is bad. And then and that was just because the first thing I heard was dairy is inflammatory, it's causing your acne. And then when I cut out all dairy and I was still having acne and I was like, well, I like cheese. So what are we going to do about this?
What are we going to do?
Yeah. And so I started investigating a little bit more and learned there's just different schools of thought around dairy, to be honest. And I can definitely understand where there's situations where it makes sense to remove from your diet, but there's also higher quality types of dairy and there's sourcing and all of that affects how the dairy can affect your body. And so digging into that a little bit more, I kind of changed my mind. I was like, okay, so maybe dairy itself isn't so bad, but maybe it's the type of dairy and the sourcing and, the quantity and all the things. And so that was kind of where I started to reintegrate that because it really wasn't serving me. I felt like I was like, I don't like putting like canola oil oat milk in my lattes if I don't have to. I don't have a lactose intolerance. I don't have like a reaction to dairy. And it's interesting because my skin healed the most even when I had acne, or not when I had acne, when I had dairy back in my diet. So I kind of realized like that can be inflammatory. It can be helpful to remove to get some ideas, maybe shift the way you're sourcing. But in my opinion, I was like, wait, this wasn't the magic pill solution that I think sometimes the health world sells it as. Like if you just cut out dairy or you just cut out carbs or whatever it might be. So I changed my mind on that because I didn't feel like it was serving me. I felt like I was not enjoying my lattes or, I wasn't like enjoying a pizza night with my friends. And so I had to figure out like, okay, how do I do this a little bit better if I want to have it in my diet and how can I source it a little better, but also still enjoy the things that I enjoy. And so that was one example, plenty of them, but that was one.
Love that. Yeah. I like to remind people because they're like, man, I just feel like trash when I eat dairy. And I'm like, are you eating the conventional store-bought dairy or are you like sourcing whole milk, A2 raw milk from your farm or low temp pasteurized, non-homogenized, minimally processed? There's 3 categories of milk and I would never say that those should be even on the same like nutritional
or even cheese.
equivalent.
Like, I mean, we started doing like more Parmesan or just naturally raw or like raw cheddar or just a higher, even some of them aren't raw, but like a higher quality. Like I really love the Clona
Supernatural.
Especially for cottage cheese because they have a low pasteurized cottage cheese. I feel like a lot of cottage cheese, you might be able to find low pasteurized or raw milk if that's something that you want to do. But for cottage cheese, I feel like that's harder to find that. And so I like that they have that as an option or things like that. So, and I still will have a dairy-free alternative if I can't find a good quality dairy. Like we have coconut milk or coconut yogurt occasionally. I'll put coconut milk in my coffee, but it's like full fat coconut milk, not like the watered down stuff with a bunch of gums and fillers. So just switching those things and saying, how can I get this in its most original whole form? How God made it. Like, I think sometimes we just have to go back to like, what did God create for our bodies and what did he put on the earth, and how do we get closest to that form in a world of like highly processed, highly manufactured, mass produced stuff? And then that just simplifies it a lot. So
it totally does. We love the Clona guys. We actually had them on the show like a year ago, and they have so many like SKUs of different products. Like they have cottage cheese, they have whole whipping cream, they have like all kinds of stuff.
Yogurt. Yogurt,
all kinds, and they're very widely distributed.
Which is really helpful because it makes it more accessible. A lot of people can't access raw dairy.
Totally.
Or they aren't sure how they, like I was like, in the holistic world, I know a lot of people take raw dairy when they're pregnant, but I had a lot of pregnancy issues. So I was like, I'm not messing around because I don't know. So I did that, and I was like, this is a great, better option. And I can feel good about the quality of it. And it makes it more accessible. Like you said, it's widely distributed and people can find it even in a place where they don't have a local farm connection yet, or they're not that deep into the journey where they found, the raw things. So yeah, it's a great stepping stone for sure.
Or it's more affordable for them. I mean, having affordable access to raw dairy is a whole other conversation than just having access to it, because it's a different price range. And we're very honest about that. I'm interested to hear what you're excited about today, like what you're looking forward to in your life and kind of what you're working on right now.
Yeah. So I'm working on my third book. I wish I could share the title, but it's not set in stone yet. So I'm like, my luck would be I throw it out there and then it changes. But
changes, of course.
But it feels like the book I was kind of born to write. It just feels like the culmination of so much of what I've shared and experienced, and it brings in biblical concepts. A book as old as time. It brings in like research and stats, and a real hard look at like where are we at as a culture and what does the Bible have to say about it when it comes to health. And if I had to boil it down, the heart behind the book is like, what does it look like to pursue wellness without turning it into a god that we worship? Because that's where it can kind of start to like, then you're no longer healthy if it's an idol and you're obsessed with it, right? It's now taking a toll on your mental, emotional, and spiritual health. So it's kind of that journey, and that's the heart for it. And it just feels really exciting for me. It feels hard. It's really hard to write a book with 2 under 2. I had 2 under 1 for a second there. And I'm just like, I'm writing in like 26-minute increments when they're like occupied. And I just feel like it's taking me a while to get through, but that is something I'm excited about. And I feel like it'll really serve my community. And I think I needed a timely message for sure.
It definitely is. I think that's something where when you see people kind of be in the crunchy space and then take a really hard turn out of it, almost like the ex-crunchy folks. It's almost the same. I don't even want to compare this, but like sometimes it feels like the same as like church hurt. Like they were in a community and they felt like people were going super hard after something, and then they were like, wait, I'm obsessing and making an idol out of this. And then they abandoned everything.
Yeah, it's like go to the extreme opposite. It's like no, that's not the solution either. I mean, I think the same thing can happen on so there's like spectrums, and there's always going to be ends of the spectrum. And it's like there's body neglect, and then there's like full-blown body positivity, and not wrong to be positive about your body, but the way culture has turned it into like, it doesn't matter. It's like, well, that's like that, or I'm sorry, that's body, like it can lead you to neglect your well-being, I guess. And then there's body obsession of like trying to control everything and be as thin and lean and everything as possible. And it's like, what's the middle ground? And really the middle ground of all of these conversations is wise stewardship, not obsession and not neglect, or not idolatry and not apathy. It's stewardship, which generally tends to be right in the middle. And the details of that will look slightly different for each of us, given our resources, our season of life, and all of that. And it really just comes down to understanding like we won't reach perfection on this side of heaven. We don't get to recreate heaven here, but we can try to bring heaven to earth in the simple ways we can and go back to the basics and make each decision, or the next decision we make, a better one. It's kind of how I've heard it said, without feeling like every decision has to be absolutely perfect.
There are some things that are worth fighting for. There are some things that are worth gritting your teeth and getting after it. And I think your health, your wellness, your spiritual life, these sorts of things, there is never going to be perfection. And that's okay. That's what a real food journey is. And the journey, the end, there is none. It's a constant pursuit of fulfillment and a joyful life. But man, we're trying to better ourselves in a number of ways. So I love that. That's really good.
Well, and I think when in doing that, like you said, it's not something you should compromise on in terms of like just throwing it out the window because you realized maybe you were being unhealthy in the way that you were doing it by being obsessive. But it comes down to like, you got to prioritize something. So pick your priorities, and that might vary season to season, but if you can do 80% great or 70% great, then like It's so, you know, it's like, that's where you can release. I think a lot of people just, like you said, kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater, if you will, and go to the opposite. And it's like, well, now you're just neglecting it. And that's just as harmful as like obsessing it over it. So
it is. And I think another piece of the conversation is like, well, is it becoming your identity? Because if your identity isn't rooted in what it should be rooted in, then of course you're going to be like a bag in the wind, and you're going to jump from, oh, I was crunchy, now I'm X crunchy. Well, that's just another identity.
Just another label. Yeah.
Right. And so really encouraging folks, and it's funny because you can't have this conversation without all these externals popping up. Well, what about finances? What about getting your spouse on board? What about da 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 da? And it's like, listen, there's a reason why folks like us share online is because we're just giving you an example of what has worked well in our life.
Yeah.
Our lives are so different, and yet we've both found ways to live peacefully and successfully in our wellness journey.
Yeah.
So no one should be taking everything that one person says and trying to apply it to their life. That wouldn't work. We're not clones of each other.
Yeah.
But what you can do is you can be honest with yourself. You can take in information. You can hear the encouragement and stories. And when you're full, like you're capped, like I can't take any more information, you take a break.
Yep.
You don't listen to the podcast every week, you know?
Yep.
So I love that. I love everything you're sharing. What do we have anything else? I mean, there's so much gold here. And Jordan, you're a speed talker, so I'm like, people don't listen on 1.5.
I need to give warnings of like, you might want to play this on half speed. That has been my toxic trait, and it's so funny because the irony is like, I host a podcast I have for 5 years, and I'm like, this is the worst thing for me to get into because I talk so fast. I mean, even growing up, like it was so funny. Even my grandma would be like, I can't understand you. You talk too fast, and so I try to slow it down, but.
You know what? Speed, but you've been succinct. So it's not like, I don't feel like there's a whole lot of unnecessary words. I'm very unnecessary.
Joey's the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah.
We love him still.
It takes me like 50 words to get a 3-word point across. Sometimes.
Everyone knows that's true.
Anyhow, I did have a few kind of wrap up questions, and I know I want to let you go here. One was a lot of people on these real food journeys or wellness journeys, as some may call it, they encounter a number of different challenges along the way. And some of those challenges can sometimes be, you know, we're making a lot of changes, and change oftentimes ruffles the feathers of the people around us. And so I wanted to ask, as you kind of dove into this kind of real food movement, real wellness movement, because you started with deodorant, so maybe not food, the friends and family and kind of like your routines, what were some of the challenges in those areas you maybe encountered along the way?
Yeah. I felt really supported by my mom. I was super thankful for that. She actually went and got her, she was so interested in it. I think she was so touched by my losses. And so that kind of triggered a lot of a response from my family, but I was really thankful to feel supported by her. She went and got her medicinal plants certification from Cornell so she could like be more aware of things.
Oh my gosh.
She's amazing. But there were definitely, you know, different situations, even within my marriage. You know, I think my husband at first was like, what? Like, you know, it's like I went deep and he was like, okay, I'll like change a few things, but can I still live my life? You know, and even it's funny because sometimes this will still happen. The other day he was like, oh, I got some skim yogurt. And before he said 6 words and I was like, oh, well, here's all the reasons we don't want to choose skim. And I went in this whole thing and he goes, babe, I got 6 words out till you just gave me an expository essay. And he's like, I'm just trying to like eat some yogurt here, you know? So there's occasional times even now where it's like, okay, he doesn't want all of the information, even though he's way more on board than most husbands would be, you know, and than he ever was before. So there was just times where I think I had to learn, what does it look like to make these changes and share what I'm learning without it looking like I'm trying to enforce it upon him or control or judge or whatever. And so there was a lot of hard conversations, especially in the beginning of like, how do I do this well? And he would give me feedback and honest feedback about like, hey Jay, we're gonna go to pizza tonight and you're gonna enjoy your life and we're done. You know, like and it actually helped me. We always say he's like my string to my balloon. Which, because I can get like floating away and go deep on these.
So much.
It's so true. Whether it's health stuff, non-toxic stuff, food, or business ideas or something else. Like when I lash onto a concept or an idea and I get it, I like go so deep. And he does in his own ways on like things that he finds interesting and creative and hobbies. But sometimes I can get really carried away with things really quickly. And so he kind of like, okay, we're going to do this in a way that we can handle, you know. So I think in some ways it was a challenge, but also it kept me grounded is the best way I can say it. There were definitely relationships where I felt like, I had to figure out, how do I do this without coming across judgmental? And I really felt like, you know what, if I go to other people's houses, I don't want to act weird about what they're serving or what they have. Cause there was a point where I'd get nervous about that, or I tried to bring my own stuff. And then I'm like, that would be offensive to me if I wasn't in this place. I remember 3 years prior to my journey, I went to a friend's house and she used all Young Living, like everything. I'm like, how the heck are essential oils cleaning everything? Like, I was just really like, why are we doing this? Get some Dove or whatever. And so I remember being in that place where I wasn't there yet mentally, and it just felt like a lot. And I was like, I kind of just wish you had Pantene shampoo here, but okay. So I kind of had to remember that. And there were definitely times I did not do that well, but I kind of went back to that often. And so that's where I was like, okay, in my guest bathroom, I'll provide something that's maybe a little cleaner, but not like this crunchiest of crunchy, products. Or when I go to someone else's house, I'm going to just call that my 20% and be good with it, so I had to just kind of be thoughtful, because there were a few times where I think it can be intimidating. People can feel like you're judging them, like you're walking in and not grateful for their hospitality because you're obsessed with what soap they use, and so I ran into challenges like that and was humbled in the process, but you live and learn, I wish I had like a perfect, like, here's exactly how to have these conversations, but the reality is the conversation is different. And the challenge you run into is different with each person, because some people will be like, oh my gosh, I'm on board too. What can I do? Like my mom. Some people are like, I'm on board, but like with a measured approach, like my husband. And then there's some people who are like, what the heck are you doing? So it really depends on the dynamic and who that relationship is. And but it's a learning curve, and it's giving yourself and other people grace in the process.
With a lot of these sorts of kind of lifestyles or worldviews, there's a common phrase, and I'll end with this because I know I'm wasting time here. And it's that, how do you know somebody's crunchy? It's like, well, they will tell you, right? It's like, how do you know somebody's vegan? It's like, oh, well, they will tell you that they are vegan, right? And so I think that sometimes remembering that in your own brain of when you walk into someone's house or some situation, or you go out to lunch, right? And you're ordering your food. It's so easy to be like, oh, well, I'm not going to have anything here because, I know that, they're totally just juicing up seed oils back there. So being so sensitive about that maybe makes sense. So I'm all done.
No,
that was your question.
It's
true. It's great. The how other people around you respond is always a sticking point, and because we always face conflict in that. So I think that's great. Jordan, let people know where they can find you and connect with you online.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Jordan Lee Dooley. You can find my podcast, She Podcast. It's kind of a wellness and womanhood podcast. Probably if you're interested in this podcast, you might enjoy it. Lots of stuff on hormones and family and pregnancy and fertility and all the things. And then you can also find a bunch of my resources, my books, anywhere books are sold. And Own Your Everyday is the first one, and Embrace Your Almost is the second one as of now. And those are Target, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the things. But most of the place, everything's kind of central to my Instagram at Jordan Lee Dooley.
Love that. And do you have a release date for your third book or not yet?
It's looking like fall of 2025, depending on if I can get this manuscript in. So, but we don't have like a set hard date quite yet.
With the 2 under 2.
Yes.
No pressure.
And at one point 2 under 1, which is like, I feel like you should get like a badge or something, like some kind of like,
you deserve a medal.
You know what I mean? Like
thing. It was the most bizarre situation, mostly because it wasn't twins. But it also wasn't a normal, like, a lot of people have like a 12, 15 month age gap and that's close together. I'm like, it's neither of those things. So who do I ask? Like, I didn't have anyone that I could go to and be like, so
no case studies.
When your 2 kids who were 5 months apart did X, Y, and Z, how did you handle that? Like, we call them twiblings because they're kind of like twins. And that first year is so unique because they're in like a 5 to 6 month difference is so significant when they're under 2 years old. But then I think that will eventually start to equal out. But yeah, I'm like, one is like, nursing, the other one's starting solids. And I'd sometimes actually like do the wrong thing for each of them because I get them mixed up, and it's just a unique situation, different sleep schedules, but
bless.
No case studies on that one.
None. You're the first, girl. You're the first. I love it. I can't wait to check out your third book when it comes out in 2025. Hopefully.
Yeah,
so
I'm excited too.
Awesome. Thanks for being on the show, Jordan. This has been really, really fun.
Thank you for having me.
And just like that, Jordan Dooley. Jordan Lee Dooley. Is that a middle name or?
Yeah, I think that's her middle name.
Okay. Has left the virtual chat. Oh my gosh. If you really like slowed this down, that's probably a 2-hour long episode.
Well, I kept looking at the timestamp, like
in an hour long time frame.
Yeah. I was like, how are we only 36 minutes
So much information.
And then I realized Jordan's a speed talker.
But like succinct speed talker.
So don't listen on 1.5.
Outstanding. Or listen to it twice. Ish. Not the same.
Not the same. But fantastic interview, fantastic story. I've been following Jordan for several years now, so it's just really cool to hear that. And this episode is definitely has some sensitive content to it, and so I always think it's helpful when you want to gain insight into a certain season of suffering, like infertility, that you talk to the people that have walked through that. That's not something I personally experienced, and so I learned a lot just hearing her perspective, and just how if you have someone in your life going through that, like don't try to relate to something you haven't walked through. That's so helpful.
The group chat, announcement of we're pregnant, but we know that so-and-so, like I felt that when she was talking about that, right? Of, hey, I know this is like last thing that y'all want to hear right now, but oh my gosh, it would just hit me. And I was like, glad I'm not going to run into that scenario, but that is really wise information. So, wow.
Love that.
Hey, if you want to check her out, go get her books, go get on her Instagram, show her some love. She's got a podcast, the She Podcast, SHE, just She Podcast.
She Podcast.
Love that. That's super cool. She's awesome. A wealth of knowledge. Go check her out. And if you want to hear more from us, you could do that. You could find us on Instagram. You could find more episodes like this. If this is your first time listening, there are more episodes like this. You can check us out on Instagram as well. We have homegrown_education. I'm at Joey Hazelmeyer. Elizabeth is at Liz Hazelmeyer. We also have things for you to equip you to make your real food journey easier and better. We have educational stuff. We have books that we've created as well. We sell those books on homegrowneducation.org. Everything from meal plans to help you cook awesome, amazing, clean food in your kitchen and keep you inspired. But also, we have educational resources for your kids and for you on there. Curriculum for your kids. Whether you're a homeschooler or not, this can be a summer activity book that you take your kids through to get them in the game, to get them on track towards real food and freedom in that early. We also have the Real Food Guide for you to kind of get in the game if you're new at this, or you need a brush up or just some new inspiration. Maybe you're at the, you're deep into that real food game. Maybe you're in the obsessive spot. Maybe you're in the, just changed over, you're making your first sourdough. Good news. We've got sourdough stuff on there. We got free sourdough guide. We got a raw dairy guide, all that stuff, homegrowneducation.org. Check it out. And get yourself set up, get your kids those books. We've also got a store of home goods online called hazelmeyergoods.com or shoptheh.com. Coffee, tea, lard dish soap, horsehair brushes. We got sourdough tools to up your sourdough game if you're already in the sourdough game. We got coffee mugs and bread boxes and just all kinds of awesome
other things
stuff.
coming.
So much stuff coming. Holy smokes. So get on shoptheh.com to check that stuff out. We have a Substack where we share exclusive content. Where do people find the Substack?
You go to substack.com and you look up Homegrown Education.
Boom. Substack.com, Homegrown Education. Find us there. And that is a paid subscription situation. So if you want to find that exclusive podcast content, it can be found at Homegrown Education on substack.com. And there's a free and a paid version. You're going to want the paid version.
Yeah, we don't share much on the free.
So the free, you can click that, but I encourage you that if you want that exclusive content, you're going to need to get the paid version. And is there anything else here?
No, I think that's
Friends, until next time, that's a wrap.